Across the Atlantic, a quiet revolution is unfolding, a shift so monumental it could rewrite the rules of global trade. Allies once loyal to Washington are exploring new paths, and Canada is at the very center of this high-stakes transformation.
Mark Carney is headed to London, where he's expected to meet with the leaders of the United Kingdom, Spain, and Denmark. And this morning in Ottawa, the Prime Minister hosted his counterpart from Ireland.
One of our strongest relationships culturally, economically, with respect to shared values and foreign policy.
Before we get into this high-stakes international drama, subscribe and enable notifications because what you're about to hear completely rewrites North America's future economy and politics. Ireland's leader has issued a message impossible to ignore. Joining forces with Canada is now the no-brainer option in the face of U.S. tariffs. On the same day, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney left Ottawa for London, off to meet with United Kingdom, Spanish, and Danish leaders. At first blush, these actions may appear routine, but collectively, they indicate a grander, more extreme reality. Washington's tariff crusade, designed to bring allies in closer, is instead pushing them toward Canada, forming parallel alliances in broad daylight. From early September, the Trump administration has implemented its reciprocal tariff regime with an iron fist. Duty-free treatment for small imports has been withdrawn. Heavy trucks are now subject to new surcharges, and from October 1st, branded drugs will be facing a whopping 100% tariff. The European Union, already circumscribed by a 15% limit on auto and parts exports to the US, is now remeasuring its options. Among their membership, Ireland has opted to speak out what others think only in secret. Ireland and Canada have a past of partnership. Their trade has doubled since the provisional application of the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, came into effect only 7 years ago. Dublin now has committed to ratifying the agreement, formally this year and sending a high-level trade mission to the other side of the Atlantic. The incentive for Ireland is clear as day. American tariffs most target drugs, a category that brings tens of billions to the Irish economy each year. By strengthening ties to Canada, Irish policymakers are ensuring against chaos in their biggest market. But the partnership is not all about exports. Irish officials have welcomed Canadian companies to invest in groundbreaking infrastructure projects, such as Dublin's proposed metro system. At the same time, Irish businesses recognize enormous potential in Canada's own large-scale infrastructure schemes, ranging from public transportation to energy projects. Yes, there are challenges. Interprovincial trade tensions, regulatory red tape, and bureaucracy may impede progress. But both governments are recognizing those hurdles and are taking steps to simplify procedures, reflecting a desire for long-term partnership. Timing is everything. Ireland will take over the EU Council presidency in the second half of 2026. For Canada, this means not just a trading partner but also a politically powerful partner within the European system, just when Washington's confrontational trade policy is creating instability on the continent. This Irish statement has implications far beyond the bilateral trade. When a mid-sized EU economy positions Canada as a hedge against American unaccountability, it gives legitimacy to a wider rebalancing. Carney's frenetic rounds of meetings in London and continental capitals are representative of this trend. Nations are no longer waiting for rescue from Washington. Now they are writing new playbooks for their economic destinies. Although the US-EU arrangement keeps most tariffs at 15%, the unpredictability of Trump's policies makes diversification not only sensible, but necessary. Business and governments now demand certainty, and increasingly, that certainty is in reinforced Europe-Canada conduits. To America, this dynamic is an erosion of leverage. The initial objective of the tariff plan was straightforward: bring investment and supply chains back to American soil. But rather than consolidating trade, Washington is seeing partners deepen connections with each other, frequently with Canada at its center. What was intended to concentrate trade is now spreading it. Already its effects are seen. Increased tariffs on domestic items, furniture, and trucks threaten to push domestic prices higher. The drug surcharge has the potential to lead to shortages if U.S. manufacturing capacity does not increase rapidly. At the same time, capital, contracts, and partnerships are falling increasingly into Canada and Europe, skirting American markets. Ireland's official ratification of CETA and its near-future trade mission will be milestones. Just as important will be the results of Carney's European tour and subsequent deals between Canada and Britain. The message to U.S. policymakers is simple: tariffs might divert trade flows, but they cannot determine where those flows end up settling. The Ireland-Canada switch is evidence. Pressure aimed at supporting America's centrality is instead inducing allies to spin alternatives together. The actual scoreboard will not be speeches, but rather the investment allocation, export share growth, and supply chain mapping in the subsequent quarters. In 2025, when President Trump made the announcement of his program of retaliatory tariffs, the goal was evident. Ottawa would have to give in due to duties on steel, aluminum, and copper. Canada was supposed to be alone, with no choice but to yield. But a different tale has unfolded. Instead of surrendering, Canada has looked elsewhere for friends. Perhaps no development has been more visible than during Prime Minister Mark Carney's 36-hour visit to Mexico City, when Canada and Mexico agreed on a strategic partnership pact. The visit was short, but its message was historic. Attempts to trap Canada have served only to deepen its ties across the continent. Mexico, long neglected by Canada's strategic thinkers, has suddenly stepped forward into the spotlight. Under President Claudia Sheinbaum, the country is aggressively implementing domestic reforms while looking for partners outside Washington's sphere, and Ottawa is poised to walk through that door. Agriculture brings this change to life vividly. Canadian canola farmers, hammered by US tariffs and the collapse of Chinese demand, now have an unplanned lifeline: Mexico's expanding biofuel market. It provides Canada with an opportunity to win back markets long believed lost, turning a crisis into opportunity. But the alliance is much more than about crops. Energy and infrastructure are its core. Both administrations have committed to collaborative endeavors on ports, railroads, and energy corridors, precious conduits that will finally enable Canada to transport oil, gas, and minerals effectively, shoring up long-standing vulnerabilities in trade talks. For Mexico, it means new investment and secure access to Canadian products, bolstering its own economic situation. Pundits observe the seeds of a broader North American realignment. Smaller countries, pinched by Trump's bold tariff policy, are forced to move quickly or be left behind. Ironically, the same pressure meant to alienate Ottawa and Mexico City has done the opposite, pushing the two capitals closer together in a unified, more formidable front. At the center of the renewed partnership is common cause. CUSMA, Canada and Mexico, are aware that the 2026 review hangs over them and the specter of unilateral US action is credible. Canada initiated public consultations September 20th to November 3, 2025, inviting business comment on vulnerabilities and priorities. Mexico initiated a parallel process on September 17th. The timing is intentional. Both countries are gearing up for potentially volatile and possibly retaliatory negotiations. Trump's track record is well established. Threats of withdrawal, fresh tariffs, or impromptu policy reversals are always an option. That is why Carney and Sheinbaum went out of their way to describe their union as complementary to CUSMA, rather than as a bloc of resistance against the United States. The tone is phrased diplomatically, but the message is clear. Both nations are constructing insurance policies in the event that Washington backs away. Canada for years was unable to get its natural resources to market. That vulnerability undercut its bargaining power in all trade negotiations. Entering into an agreement with Mexico is specifically addressing this shortfall, providing Ottawa with a second route and bolstering its presence in the North American economy. That is where the irony lies. Tariffs designed to punish Canada have made Canada more powerful. Washington's pressure has also compelled Canada to move fast, to forge coalitions long in the making. Since the earliest times of NAFTA, Canada is not retreating in the face of threat but innovating, diversifying, and getting ready to hold firm when talks resume next year. This revolution goes beyond trade. Canada is diverting huge investments from the United States to Europe and Asia, capitalizing on the uncertainty in Washington to gain new opportunities. Defense, infrastructure, and energy projects that previously would have gone to U.S. allies are now being distributed to Germany, South Korea, and other foreign allies. The most conspicuous example is Canada's submarine program. Up to 12 new submarines to replace Ottawa's 4 older British-built submarines is a project worth tens of billions of Canadian dollars. Only 2 remain, Germany's ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems and South Korea's Hanwha Ocean. The German proposal is more expensive. The South Korean one offers quicker delivery, perhaps even before 2030. Yet remarkably, American contractors are nowhere to be found on the list. Billions of dollars that may have previously flowed into American shipyards now are bound for Hamburg or Bizen. This shift is not an accident. Trump's tariffs on Canadian metals, copper, and softwood lumber, some up to 50%, sent a pointed message. Ottawa is pushing back. If Washington intends to treat Canada as a commercial enemy, it cannot expect devotion in defense contracts. The submarine program fits into a bigger trend. Last August, Prime Minister Carney traveled around Poland, Germany, and Latvia, putting trade, energy, and defense at the center of each discussion. In Berlin, he inked a critical minerals agreement connecting Canada's 200 mining ventures directly to Europe's defense and industrial markets. In Warsaw, he solidified NATO partnership with Poland, among Europe's most rapidly expanding defense spenders. Energy policy also comes into the picture. Carney has supported shipping Canadian LNG to Europe from Manitoba's Churchill port, diversifying European supplies away from Russian gas while creating new markets for Canada. The warning is clear. Whenever Washington slaps tariffs, Ottawa retaliates by constructing alternatives. Europe is paying attention. Despite a 15% tariff limit recently negotiated with the U.S., the exercise underlined the expense and uncertainty of engaging Trump's policies. Canada is preempting, developing sheltering coalitions ahead of the next shockwave. The ironies are central. Tariffs that were meant to solidify U.S. influence are doing the opposite and opening the way for Germany, South Korea, and other allies to land contracts that used to go exclusively to American companies. Defense spending worth tens of billions of dollars is now departing the U.S. sphere. This is not to say Canada is pulling away from its southern neighbor. More than 85% of Canadian exports continue tariff-free under CUSMA, but Ottawa is illustrating a plain fact. It has alternatives. Submarine contracts, minerals collaborations, LNG shipments, and wider trade diversification all serve to tell the same story. Canada will not be pushed into a corner. Trump's bullying tariffs intended to dominate and bully have accidentally given increased independence to Canada and fashioned a system of tough partnerships. If the intention was to keep allies close, it has instead pushed them away. And Canada is poised to grab the opportunities Washington never envisioned. And in this new global game of chess, there is one thing apparent. Canada is not falling behind. It is rising stronger, with options no U.S. tariff can ever remove. Greenland, long regarded as a strategic prize for its immense natural resources and dominant Arctic location, has once more become a focal point of global tension. Denmark recently accused the United States of secret operations aimed at creating discord within Greenland, a grievance that rattled one of NATO's most intimate alliances. Danish authorities warned that such influence operations contravene international law and undermine allies' confidence. At the same time, Canada is moving definitively in the reverse direction. Instead of pressure or backdoor manipulation, Ottawa is building closer ties with Denmark on green energy and trade cooperation. The Arctic, once the preserve of Washington's ambitions, is witnessing a new player extend influence through partnership and innovation. Trump's interest in Greenland stems from its strategic significance. Military outposts that surveil Russia, sources of essential minerals, and bargaining power in global calculations. However, there have been recent accounts suggesting at least 3 Americans associated with Trump's team were allegedly engaged in secret influence operations on the island. They allegedly promoted separatism and nurtured networks favorable to Trump's interests. European onlookers compared these methods to Russia's previous playbook in Ukraine: blow up domestic cleavages, and then strategically exploit them. Denmark acted fast. Authorities called in the senior U.S. diplomat in Copenhagen and opened official probes. The implications reach far beyond the confines of Greenland itself, casting suspicion on whether Washington can be relied upon to maintain NATO's founding values. As Washington's methods incite furor, Canada is gently crafting an alternative, resilient model of influence. Ottawa has worked with Copenhagen to create a green trade corridor. Canada became a member of the Global Offshore Wind Alliance in February 2025, linking its Atlantic provinces with Denmark's global leading offshore wind know-how. Initiatives like the Taklu Wind and Hydrogen Development in Newfoundland and Labrador, supported by Danish infrastructure partners, are set to produce green hydrogen for export to Europe. Denmark's vision of energy islands, man-made platforms, linking wind farms and hydrogen production, is already shaping Canadian planning. Outside energy, Canada's aluminum industry is also gaining strategic ground. Made largely from hydropower, Canadian aluminum is some of the cleanest anywhere. As the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism is scheduled for 2026, aluminum made with fossil fuels will be subject to new tariffs, putting Canadian producers at a major advantage in Europe's low-carbon revolution. By 2024, bilateral trade between Canada and Denmark amounted to around $2.7 billion US. But the true value is in its quality and potential for the future. Green technology, hydrogen manufacturing, and Arctic collaboration are setting the stage for decades of sustained influence and economic stability. 2 rival visions now appear. To the left, Donald Trump seeks influence by threatening and operating behind the scenes. Conversely, Canada and Denmark are cultivating strength through collaboration, green industries, and consistent, dependable alliances on the Atlantic. Canada is not just responding to American pressure. By aligning with Denmark, it is establishing strategic alternatives, breaking dependency on the U.S. market while expanding its presence in Europe. The Arctic's future, and by extension, the future of global influence, won't be dictated by who yells the loudest, but who establishes the most stable and visionary collaborations. In that regard, Canada and Denmark are already well ahead, demonstrating that genuine influence is wielded through cooperation, not force. The world is being remade before our very eyes. Alliances are emerging, trade flows are changing, and power is shifting stealthily away from expected trends. Canada's tale is testimony that pressure only makes one stronger, transfiguring. If you wish to remain a step ahead of these global developments, see how trading, energy, and defense policies are remapping the globe. Subscribe now, ring the notification bell, and share your thoughts in the comments. The stakes are high, the map is altering, and this is merely the start.